take a customer-centric approach to telling your story. Stop focusing on yourself and what your products offer, and instead start thinking about your customer, their needs, and their pain points.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this week's Entrepreneurship 101 presentation. My name is Carrie Damon. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship Programs here at Mars. We are happy to see such a great crowd come out tonight because who was here last week? So what did Mark Zimmerman say about the business plan? He's like, get rid of that. But there are some cases, and there is an argument for the business plan, and our speaker tonight, Jane Kearns, who's from our Cleantech practice, is going to make that case. So I'm glad that you showed up to after business model canvas, hearing about that and how you know the business plan has changed and how it's used in entrepreneurship. So we'll talk about that a bit tonight. I did want to welcome our webcast audiences. We have NORCAT in Sudbury watching, Innovation Factory in Hamilton, and Haltech as well, which is very exciting, and welcome to them. We do have a few announcements before I introduce our speaker. Very exciting, on December 9th, so coming up quickly, we are doing a live stream of the Lean Startup Conference from San Francisco, California. It starts because of the time difference. I think it starts about noon, but if you look online, we're actually planning oh, there's excitement in the front row. We're doing some events that are custom events that we're holding here, including an extra Meet the Entrepreneurs, where we're going to talk to a panel of entrepreneurs who are using Lean Startup as they build their business and their product. So I highly recommend that event, especially if you're new and you don't know very much about Lean Startup. They do it at a very fast, rapid pace. There's tons of speakers, and they're quite short, so you're going to get a lot of content, and it'll be really fun, and there'll be lots of energy here. Also coming up we ran our very first fall intensive program this last fall, where we, based on demand, connected all our different workshop series into sort of one consecutive program. It was a success, and we got pretty good reviews, so we're going to try it again. If you're interested, it's every Friday from January 17th to April 4th. It goes through the 5 series that you can see there, and it is space limited. We did have about 40 more people than spots for the last time, so I definitely recommend applying early and getting a slot there. For those of you who applied for the Upstart workshops, the deadline was today, and we've got quite a number of applications, so we'll be going through those quite quickly and getting back to you soon. And in other announcements, the Mars CEO, Dr. Ilse Trinicht, was named one of Canada's most powerful women for the 4th time since 2009. So she's actually at a party right now celebrating that. So we're extremely proud that she has such a national profile and has really put Mars on the map. So I just wanted to toast our leader, Dr. Trinicht. And lastly, next week is our last Entrepreneurship 101 session before the break. It's our version of a party. We're going to have a Meet the Entrepreneurs session with the ICT, or what we call the ICE practice here at Mars. So there'll be 3 cool startups to take lots of your questions, and it'll be followed by a networking session. So we hope you can come to that. And we hope you also join us again in January when we have Alan Lau as our Lived It lecturer. He's a serial entrepreneur, and he's pretty amazing, so we're pretty excited about him coming. And with that, I will introduce our probably our newest speaker to Entrepreneurship 101, Jane Kearns. She did moderate Meet the Entrepreneurs in Cleantech last year, but this is her first actual lecture. She's a senior advisor in the Cleantech practice at Mars. She's a recognized leader in sustainable innovation. She's worked for 15 years in environmental finance, cleantech, and sustainability, and really helped businesses that matter. She co-founded, grew, and profitably sold a full-service renewable energy company called Clean Energy Development, so she's a real entrepreneur, which is awesome. And throughout her career, she has worked with advisors and executives on project and equity financing, mergers and acquisitions, strategic planning, and business development. She also helped launch Columbia Business School's first environmental finance course, which continues to be taught in its MBA and EMBA programs, as well as Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. I find Cleantech to be one of the most inspiring practices at Mars. Their energy is amazing. They really believe in what they're doing, so we're always happy to have speakers from Cleantech. Welcome, Jane.
Thanks, Carrie. I hope I can prove to be somewhat inspiring, like you've described Cleantech. I am admittedly feeling a little bit naked standing up here following on Mark Zimmerman's talk last week saying, you know, throw out the business plan. And here I am to talk to you for the next 45 minutes about why you should have a business plan. I'm going to have a little chat with my colleague about that one. Although in many senses he is actually right, and we'll sort of cover some of those cases. So I'm going to do a fair amount of talking at you tonight. So before I start talking at you, if you can give me a little feedback, that would be great. So who in the room already has an idea for a business? Okay, so lots of you. How many of them are IT or software? How many of them are a physical thing that you actually will need to build? Okay. How many of you have already sort of started down the path of developing that product or that business? Oh, impressive, lots of you, okay. And how many of you have been entrepreneurs before? This isn't your first time round. All right, so for those of you who are watching online, I apologize, I can't see your hands going up, but I'm going to assume that we have about the same percentages. So my job here today is basically to help you understand some of the tools that you can use to help you turn your idea or your product into an actual business. So I'm going to focus on the business plan, and I'll explain exactly what I mean by that, because ultimately all of the other tools really do stem from what you do in your business planning. There's no right or wrong way to prepare a business plan, and in fact, very, very often a formal plan isn't necessary, as you heard last week. So I'll explain the various tools, how and why they're used, and then it will really be up to you to figure out your best path forward and what tools you want to take advantage of. So me, why am I standing up here talking to you? I've really seen startups from all sides. I started my career in venture capital in New York more years ago than I would like to admit. Then I founded a company which we grew, as Carrie said, and we sold it to a publicly traded company out of Calgary a number of years ago. I've made a number of angel investments, and now I mentor companies here in the Cleantech practice at Mars. So I really have seen startups from all different sides. I see the mistakes, the struggles, the successes, the triumphs that happen literally on a daily basis around here. I know often it's a little bit hard to see the forest for the trees when you're in startup mode, but I also know from experience that investors, including me, won't invest in companies where the management team isn't really clear on where they're going and how they intend to get there and why they're going in that direction. And that's really where business planning comes in. I've seen companies start with very thorough plans. I've seen companies start with no plans. Sometimes the ones that do all of the planning aren't necessarily the successful ones, and vice versa. So there really are no hard and fast rules about business planning. In spite of that, I'm going to tell you about them because Carrie asked me very nicely to do so. And regardless of whether or not you follow Mark's advice and you don't write a full plan, you really do need to do all of the thinking that is behind a business plan. So before I jump into the communication tools, I'm going to lay a little bit of a foundation for the talk. These are just some things that I really want you to keep in mind as we go through the presentation. So Peter Drucker is a Harvard professor. He really is, I hate the word guru, but he really is a management guru. He's a bit of a legend. His 10 or 11 words, whatever they are above, are really, really essential to keep in mind. They should drive everything that you do as an entrepreneur. It's very easy to get wrapped up in your product or your technology and to forget that the goal is actually to build a business, and business is based on getting and keeping your customers. So the legend has it that Peter Drucker was meeting with a bunch of executives, the senior management team from GM a number of years ago, 10, 15 years ago, quite a while ago. And he asked them the very simple question, why should I buy a GM car? And according to an observer in the room, apparently there were answers, but no great answers, and nobody could specifically say, buy GM because we rock because of this, this, and this characteristic. That one sort of lack of answer to a really basic question about customers should have been a very clear clue that GM was headed for trouble. So the point of everything that I'm going to tell you today is to make you think, and think really hard about your answer to Peter Drucker's question. Because GM didn't have a good answer to that question, and they made products that people didn't want to buy, and the government bailed them out. But the chances that you will be that lucky are very, very slim. These are just a few reasons why companies fail. They don't understand what the customers want. They underestimate the competition. It's not enough differentiation in the market. They don't plan properly. They all seem really obvious, but it's surprising how many companies have failed because of these things. So proper business plan won't necessarily guarantee that these things don't happen to you, but they certainly help. This one's just in here because I really kind of liked the picture. Basically, business planning will make sure that you don't end up in the same place as Lenny's Laundromat and the other companies that haven't fully understood all of their various parts of their business, and most importantly, what their customers want and need. So I really like what the Roman philosopher Cicero said, which was basically, before beginning, plan carefully. And so whether you write a full business plan or whether you start your business without one, whether you just use the business model canvas, you need to do the proper planning. So I was sitting off at the side and I couldn't really see. How many of you were actually here last week? Okay, so about half of you. I'm going to assume the same for online. So based on the comments from both Carrie and I, you now know that, that the business model canvas is a tool that can be used as sort of a semi-replacement for a business plan. It basically, for those who weren't here, it basically lets you see your business on one page, the various aspects of your business. And it's something that can be iterated quite simply and quite quickly. You can do it daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, depending on how quickly your business is changing. And it really does help you address gaps in your business. As I've said, in many cases, it is absolutely correct that the business model canvas can replace the business plan. Often, also, a minimum viable product is more interesting to investors than a 20-page boring business plan. Which route you choose to go will really depend on what kind of business you're in and what your investors are looking for. I'll talk about the investors piece in a little bit, but usually those of you who are making things that are actual tangible products, they take longer to get to market. It's a lot more expensive to have sort of a little demo or a little prototype. And so in that case, often a business plan actually does make quite a bit of sense. So over the course of the next little while, I'm going to tell you about the importance of these things: the elevator pitch, the executive summary, the financials, and the business plan, which is where we'll spend most of the time. And actually, first, I'm going to let Sean Wise tell you a little bit about the elevator pitch.
If you've got a great idea but need the cash to make it go, well, then you better start working on your elevator pitch. What is an elevator pitch? It's the term used for the 2-minute presentation, the exact amount of time it takes to go from the lobby to the investor's office on the top floor to capture investor interest. Get it right, and they'll invite you into the boardroom. Get it wrong, and they'll call security. What makes a good elevator pitch? A good elevator pitch is made up of 2 key elements. First, You have to lay out the pain statement. What problem is it that you are trying to solve? Second, you must show the value proposition. How does your venture solve that problem? That may sound easy, but it's not. Every great elevator pitch must meet 4 key tests. First, it must be succinct. After all, this guy's only going to give you 2 minutes. Number 2, it must be easy to understand. There's no room for tech talk in an elevator pitch. Both your grandma and your grandkids have to get it. Number 3, it must be greed-inducing. After all, investors want to make money, and lots of it. Number 4, it has to be irrefutable. If your elevator pitch leaves investors with more questions than answers, well, you better go back to the drawing board.
Okay, it's a little silly, but all of the points he covers are bang on. And I have to tell you, I was Googling elevator pitch as I was preparing for tonight, and that came up, and I thought, yeah, whatever, I'll watch that. And I went, hey, wait, that's the Mars elevator. Hey, wait, that's Peter Evans. So the guy who does most of the talking is a guy named Sean Wise, but the guy who's going up in the elevator, he's a guy named Peter Evans, and he will be doing one of the E101 talks right at the very end. He talks about the pitch. You absolutely must come hear it. He is fantastic. So back to what I'm supposed to talk about. The elevator pitch sounds really simple, but unless you have a really clear definition of the problem you're solving and why you're solving it, why your solution's better, you're basically toast. It takes a lot of work to condense all of the important information and parts of your business plan into just a couple of minutes. So exact same thing goes for the executive summary. You really can't write a good executive summary until you've already figured out all of the other parts of your business plan or done your business model canvas. I would strongly suggest writing it last. I'm just putting it at the beginning because that's where it shows in the business plan. But really, all of the thinking that you need to do will lead into the executive summary. So before I move on to the business plan, let me make it really clear that a good elevator pitch and a good executive summary are the key things that you need to open the door with any investor. They won't take the time to read your full business plan that you spend a long time writing if they're not engaged by what they either hear when you talk to them and give them your 2-minute spiel, or what they read in your executive summary. So if you don't get it right and you're looking for money, you're going to have a really, really hard time. Speaking again to the, to business plan or not to business plan. So just for my own edification, and remember there's no right or wrong, how many people in the room actually think a business plan is important? And how many don't? Okay, so again, apologies to those online. So I pulled a number of VCs as part of my prep for tonight, because I wanted to see what they thought, if they thought a business plan was important. And it was not unanimous, but the overwhelming majority said yes. So if you are looking for venture capital or angel dollars, you really do need to write a business plan. You can also write one for internal purposes. That is totally up to you. A business model canvas may do the job, or you may want to go through the thinking of a full business plan. Either way, I really like the quote from President Eisenhower, and I may not have this quite right, but I think I'm close. Plans are worthless, but planning is everything. So whether you write a formal plan or not, going through the thinking is really critical. Your business plan is essentially a roadmap. It describes what you plan to do and how you plan to do it. Allows you to track your progress, to benchmark against planned milestones, and basically to hold yourself accountable for those goals. They can be internal facing or external. They can be long, they can be short, it can be a PowerPoint, it can be a Word document. It all depends on the purpose of your document, and it really is up to you to decide how you want to do it. companies don't fail because they can't build their product, by and large. They fail because they can't execute. They don't understand their customer, they don't understand their competition, and they don't understand their market. These are essentially the parts of a business plan. Like I said, it varies, but basically this is what an investor is going to be looking for. From the investor's perspective, they really want to see that the entrepreneur understands the market, that they've identified their potential customers, that they, I can't read that without my glasses on. I'm getting old, I don't like that. I'm gonna have to read the one that's on my page. Anyways, that they've identified their potential customers, that they know the competition, that they know how they're going to sell it, which is your marketing plan, that they understand all the necessary processes, which is your operations plan, that you have a capable team, and that you know how you're going to make money. Company overview. Pretty much exactly what it says. Basically, think about this as your About Us section on your web page. The trick really, like with your executive summary and your elevator pitch, the trick is to craft your story clearly, concisely, in words that entice your reader to want to use, or to want to learn more and keep reading. Too often, entrepreneurs get caught up in breathy adjectives and overblown superlatives and cheesy cliches. They evangelize and they forget to actually say what it is that their company does. So let me give you a non-business example. You go out somewhere and you get talking to somebody and you say, hey, what do you do? And they say, well, I'm an architect. And you go, oh, that's interesting. Do you do residential or commercial? Have you designed any buildings that I know about? Oh, you did the library at the university. That's a great building. And the conversation just goes on from there. Somebody could say, I'm a passionate, innovative, dynamic provider of architectural services who uses a collaborative approach to create and deliver outstanding customer experience. And that will make you just walk away, because what are you going to say to that? So you don't want to do that in your business plan, in your company overview, in your executive summary. Like, say it like it is, keep it simple, keep it clear. So by and large, the market analysis is where things start to break down in the business plan process. Many entrepreneurs don't put enough time and energy and thought into analyzing the market that they're actually trying to compete in. So your research really is critical. And you need to be able to answer questions like, what's the size of your target market? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Is it seasonal? Are there other products out there that are similar to yours? Have the customers bought those products? What happens if there's an economic downturn? Are there socioeconomic factors that can affect your business? Is it affected by government regulation? And the list goes on and on and on and on. So once you've sort of thought through all of the key indicators for your market, then you need to make some projections about your target market in terms of how much you actually think that you're able to sell into it, or how much you think customers would buy, and how they'll be affected by various trends. And then once you have all of this information, you need to condense it down into a few nice, short, clearly written paragraphs. Simple, right? May have seen this one before, I don't know. I just want to remind you that your customers are really important. I'll probably say this 4 times throughout the presentation. Your customers are really important. I see a lot of companies that are operating in stealth mode, and I understand why, because they're either afraid that somebody will beat them to market, or they haven't got their IP covered yet, or whatever the reason, they're operating in stealth mode, and they're spending a lot of time and money building out a product without actually knowing that there is somebody at the other end of all of this money spending who is going to buy their product. So in the customer analysis section, you really need to try and answer questions like, how old is your customer? What are their needs, their tastes, their desires? What gender are they? Where do they live? What kind of a living do they make? What motivates them? Yada, yada, yada. And generally, what I find is that entrepreneurs assume that they know what their customers want, but they never actually ask them. You need to get out and talk to people. You can't do this kind of research on the internet or in your own head. So I strongly advise all of you to make sure that you understand what your customers actually want. So now that you understand your market and your customers, you need to understand your competitors, what value they provide, their strengths, their weaknesses, and consequently where your business fits into the market. That will help you tailor your product, your pricing, how you do your marketing. It really is an important section, and I find that it gets dismissed too easily by entrepreneurs. The general take on it is like, my product rocks, it's way better than yours, you suck, I win. It doesn't actually work that way usually. You really do need to understand your competitors. So I would start by making a list of who my competitors are. And I would remember, and urge you to remember, that it's not just your direct competitors. You actually have indirect competitors too. So for example, you're running a movie theater. Your competition isn't necessarily just all of the other movie theaters, it's all of the other entertainment that is available that somebody could go to as opposed to going to the movie theater. If you are a house painter, your competition could be the landscaper because you're both competing for the same home renovation dollars that are available. So your competition is actually broader than most people think it is. So once you have your list of competitors, you need to understand how your product stacks up against the competition. Take an honest look at their offerings. And I would suggest that you think about it from the perspective of the customer, because then you tend to get a little more of an objective overview of your product offering versus that of your customers. Really use this as an opportunity to highlight your competitive advantage, your unique selling propositions, why you are uniquely qualified to succeed. Okay, I have a lot of talking to do on the marketing plan, so bear with me. Basically, now that you understand your customers, you understand your market, you now need to tell the potential investor, or internally, if this is an internal plan, you need to figure out how you are getting that product out to your customers and how you're going to turn them into repeat customers. Marketing plan is based on the 4 Ps. Most of you have probably heard of these things. They're product, price, promotion, and place. Product is pretty obvious. This is where you get to talk about your product, why it's amazing, detail the products and features, or detail the features, talk about your unique selling proposition, that thing that distinguishes you from your competitors. Then you need to talk about promotion, which is how you are going to let customers know about your product. Are you going to use TV ads, press releases, PR, free samples, trade shows, direct mail, online marketing? Basically, you need to explain your path and why you've chosen that path and why it is the best path forward. Make sure, given that we live in 2013, almost 14, make sure that you think through your keyword strategy, your search engine optimization strategy, any paid online advertising you're gonna do, your social media strategy. Those are all really, really, really important and often very inexpensive ways for you to get your product out to your customers. Pricing strategy. You competing on price, or are you a high-end product? Are you a one-time sale, or is this a repeat business where you can create a subscription service? Are you licensing? So basically, what's your strategy, whatever model you choose, and there's tons of information online if you need to do some researching about options. Whatever your strategy is, make sure you rationalize it. Place, this is basically your distribution strategy, how you will get your product to your customers, how will they buy from you. Will they buy directly from you? Will you have bricks and mortar store? Will you sell through somebody else? Will you sell online only? Will you sell through partners? Will you however you choose to get your product out to market, you need to detail that in your plan, and again, rationalize why you've chosen the path that you've chosen. And then sort of underlining all of those is partnerships. Will you have partnerships that will enable you to do any of these things better, faster, cheaper? For example, if you make guitar strings, maybe it makes sense to partner with a company that manufactures guitars. It gives you access to their customer base. It's a really inexpensive way for you to grow your customer pool. So identify whether or not partnerships make sense for you. If you have those partnerships in place already, detail them in your plan. If you're working on them, say that in your plan. If you are, thinking through who might be a good partner, you can even say that in your plan. Just don't say that they're already a partner. So I get asked fairly often about whether or not to use business planning software. Something that's interesting with not all, but a lot of the business planning software that's available out there is that they don't include a section on the operations plan. But if I put my investor hat on, this is actually a really, really important segment of the plan. So investors are really interested in the viability, the feasibility, and the profitability of your company. So the parts we've talked about already show the viability, the financials, and your projections show the profitability. It's really the operations plan that tells about the feasibility of the company. Are you actually going to be able to execute on what it is that you say you're going to do? I think business planning software doesn't usually include this because it's too hard, because there are too many different options depending on what kind of a business you're running. Are you B2B or B2C? Are you a consulting business? Are you manufacturing a product? Are you developing an app? Whatever it is, they have a zillion different ways that you need to get to market. So basically, for the same reason that business planning software can't give you details, I also can't give you detail because it's just, there are too many options for you. So I'll keep my conversation a little bit general, but basically, this is how you get your product to market, or service if you're doing a service. It's where you dig into the nuts and bolts of what you're doing. You get a little bit of dirt under your fingernails, and you talk about things like how you'll make your product, how you'll manage your inventory, how you'll get your product to your customers. You get to show what you've done so far. Milestones are important, we'll talk about that. But you also get to show that you know what needs to happen next. And that's really, really important for an investor. They need to know that you understand the steps you have to take. So I guess I would probably start by defining several major milestones that you need to hit. If you're in a highly regulated business, energy storage, energy generation, or medical devices or something like that, you probably need a 5-year plan because it's going to take you forever to get to market. If you're doing software, maybe it's a 6-month plan. So whatever your time frame is, set out some of your key milestones that get you to where you need to get to. I would then break it down into some smaller steps, and then the daily, weekly, monthly things that you actually need to do to hit those milestones. So I like to think of the operations plan basically as your marching orders. So I got the foosball picture in here because I am the foosball champion as of this weekend. So I just thought that I would, remind my family that I win. The team's really important. I went to business school in New York, and except in foosball, because I won. That was not a team sport. So as Carrie said, I went to business school in New York, and one of the really cool things about going to school in New York is that it's such a hub for business. And so we always had really accomplished business leaders sort of walking the halls and teaching our classes. And one of the guys who came in and talked was a guy named Ben Rosen. He's a venture capitalist. He's the guy who funded Compaq Computer. And he said two things that really have stuck with me. One of them has nothing to do with team, but I'm going to tell you anyways. It was, you can either own 100% of a company that goes nowhere and is worth nothing, or you can own 5% of something that's really huge. And I see companies all the time that aren't willing to give up any of the equity in their company for an investor, and as a result, they don't actually go anywhere. So that one really resonates with me. The one that is relevant to tonight's talk was, he said he would way rather fund an A team with a B technology than a B team with an A technology. So don't discount how important this section of your plan is. It is really, really critical to show that you have the team in place to be able to execute on your plan. Your team bios shouldn't be just resumes. They need to be bios that actually explain the value that the person adds to the company, how their background, their past successes, their expertise are relevant to what you're trying to achieve going forward. Basically, it's your chance to explain to investors that you have the talent that you need to be able to succeed. Gaps in your team are fine. Most startups don't have the dollars to actually have their entire team in place. But acknowledge that you have some gaps in your team, what they are, and the kind of person that you'd fill them with. And if you actually have a person in mind, then indicate that you have somebody and what their background is, and that you'll bring them on when you actually have cash to pay them. I would also suggest including your board members or your advisory team members. I'm going to assume that anybody who has a board or an advisory team actually has useful people on them. And so explain how they will directly impact how the company is able to form through offering strategic advice, making introductions, bringing new customers on board, whatever it is that team can do. Okay, financials. Don't ignore the financials, they are critical. Too many of you like to ignore the financials. It isn't the spreadsheet that is important, it is the thinking behind it. You can't possibly understand your business potential if you haven't forecasted or done a projection. Yes, it's hard to project for an early stage company. Yes, they're going to be wrong. Do it anyways. Show what you have and explain your assumptions, and be able to explain every number instantaneously. There are a lot of words on this slide. I have left them plain on purpose. Read them, absorb them. They are very important. Just think about the quick little analysis that Sheldon did of the penny blossoms. It went a really long way towards highlighting that the business wasn't what Penny thought it was going to be, and it was literally just a few quick numbers. Don't discount the value of numbers. A business plan is really just interesting conceptual stuff until you start filling in the numbers. The sections about your marketing plan and your strategy are interesting to read, but they really don't mean anything if your business isn't going to make money. You need to be able to prove that your business is going to make money. It is really essential if you're looking for angel or venture capital. They're going to want to see numbers that show that your business is going to grow and that it's going to grow fast. They also are going to want to see that there's an exit strategy on the horizon. So remember that they're looking at your company as a way to make money, and in order to make money, they need to be able to get their money out. And we'll talk a little bit more about exit strategy later on. for startups, bank lending is not usually the route to go, but if that is an option for you, then the lender is also going to want to see your financials because they're going to want to make sure that you can get their money back. So you need, at the very minimum, income statement, a balance sheet, and a cash flow statement. So you start by setting up your spreadsheet, and you highlight your expected sales over a certain time frame, maybe a year, it may be 3 years, it may be 5 years, depending on where you're at with your business. Like I said, they are not going to be accurate. They are a projection, but you absolutely must do them, and you must justify them with assumptions. Then you need to create your expenses, so essentially your budget. You need to be able to explain what you're going to have to spend in order to make the sales that you've just projected. And then you need to develop a cash flow statement. This is basically dollars in, how much cash you're going to have in the business at any particular point of time. And based on this information, you're going to be able to see how much money you need and when. You need to be able to pull the important numbers from your financial statements. And remember really basic stuff, sales minus cost of goods sold is your gross margin. Gross margin less your expenses, interest, and taxes is your net income or net profit. You need to know these really basic numbers. Now we're getting on to my pet peeves. This is the fun part for me. These are things that you absolutely have to remember, and you absolutely have to remember to do them or not to do them, depending on what it is. So bear with me for a little minute. It is not all about the technology. Yes, your technology is critically important. Yes, it is the foundation of your business. But remember that the technology is the basis for your business, but it is not your business. Customers create your business. So for an investor, technical risk is definitely a big risk, but it is the easiest one for them to evaluate. What's harder to determine is whether people will use your product, whether they'll want to buy it, whether they will pay for it, whether they will cry tears of joy because they finally have access to something that will solve their problems. A product demo, whether it's a screenshot or a prototype, it can go a long way to helping a potential investor understand what it is that your product is and does, but it does not help them understand how you're going to turn it into a business. So Jerry Newman, who's a New York-based venture capitalist, likens the focus on product as opposed to business to going to a parenting class to learn how to improve your parenting. And what happens when you get there is the leaders just ooh and ah and tell you how beautiful your baby is, and you feel absolutely fantastic. But at the end of it, you're not a better parent. The same thing goes with your technology. Your technology may be super cool, but you absolutely have to prove that you can turn it into a business. You have to understand your market. Please don't say that all you need is 1% of a zillion-dollar market and everybody will be rich. It will raise massive red flags with investors, and they will shut you down right then and there. They want to see that you've assessed the size of the market and how you can get there. There needs to be rigor to your analysis. Show projected sales growth. Explain the assumptions for your sales growth. I want to know what your assumptions are as a potential investor because I want to know if your assumptions are rational. I also want to know what's driving those sales. Are you hiring a sales team? Is it through online marketing and web traffic? If so, what's your conversion rate? Are you building out a dealer network? So think exactly through how you're going to reach those targets. Yes, you have competition. As I said earlier, it may be indirect competition, but you do have competition. When the first MP3 player came out, it may have been the first MP3 player. It may have been the first 1,000 songs in your pocket. But there were still ways that you could take your music with you. You had to compete against the Walkman and the Discman. So Yes, there was competition. You may have been better, but you need to explain why you're better. When Toyota released the first Prius, yes, there were no other hybrid electric cars on the market, but the Prius was competing with every other car that was already out there on the market. So you too will have competition. It may not look exactly like what you're doing, but they're still in the same market and they're going after the same dollars. And don't just say that all of your competition sucks, because by and large, they've been in business longer than you, so they're probably doing something right. So to go back to the competitive analysis, you really do need to think about what they're doing and what they're doing right and what you do differently. I promised you we'd talk about the exit strategy again. You need to think hard about your exit strategy. First off, you have to have one. As I said, an investor's going to want to know how they're going to get their money out. It can be somewhat counterintuitive, I know. You don't necessarily start a business thinking about how you're going to get out of it, but the investor does need to know how they're going to get their money out, so you need to tell them how that might happen. As with projecting your financials, you can't guarantee anything, but it's important to tell them how it might play out. And Google is going to buy me at a 20x multiple. That doesn't work either. You need to actually give your investors some data on comparables, other companies that have had successful exits, things like sales price, their revenue at the time of sales, their sales growth, their revenue to EBITDA multiple, whatever the numbers are, you need to have some data in there. You need to describe your key milestones that you intend to hit, and based on those milestones, at which stage you think an exit is likely or possible. A realistic valuation is really important. I have rarely seen a realistic valuation. I was also guilty of this. How many of you have seen Dragon's Den? Like everybody, I'm going to assume. How many times have you seen entrepreneurs put a value on their company based on the size of the market? Like every show, all the time, somebody does it, and then they get crushed by the dragons. Or worse yet, if I just have 1% of a $1 zillion market, we'll all be rich. You cannot value your company on what might be. You have to value your company on what is. You also can't value your company based on what you've spent. The trick is to spend money on things that create value, and customers create value. So get customers, get revenue. Then the money that you have spent has created value, and you can ask for a higher valuation on your company. Don't ignore the milestones. Milestones are really important. If you don't brag about the milestones that you've hit, nobody else is going to brag about the milestones. So you need to tell investors what you've done. You also need to lay out your milestones going forward. An investor will often do due diligence over the course of 3, 6, 9, 12 months. Many times they'll actually follow a company for a couple of years until it gets to a stage where they think it's actually ready to even do due diligence. So if you lay out your milestones and then you go out and you hit those milestones on time and on budget, that venture capital company, angel investor, bank, whatever it is going to look and say, this is a very capable team. They promised me they were going to deliver. They delivered. I'm going to take a serious look. Keep your writing clutter-free. Investors are very busy people. They tend to just skim documents. You need to capture their attention quickly. You can't bury them in useless, meaningless words about how you're an architectural designer who delivered blah, 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 whatever that was. Don't use jargon. Don't use buzzwords. Don't use utilize when you can use. Keep it simple. Do use bulleted lists, but if something needs explaining, then by all means explain it. And don't confuse simple writing and simple words with simple thinking. You are not keeping it simple because you haven't fully understood your business. You are keeping it simple so you can get your point across quickly and easily and keep the attention of whoever it is that you're trying to get the attention of. This is my most important rule. You absolutely have to tell your story. It again goes to entrepreneurs being wrapped up in their technologies. And again, I was guilty of this too. Talking about your product or your technology, it doesn't tell the story. The stories of your solutions, how you've solved people's or companies' problems, the results you've achieved, those are the most powerful persuasion tools you have. Mark Evans, who is a Torontonian, he was a journalist for a long time, and he writes a blog and works with startups, helping them tell their stories. He says you need to take a customer-centric approach to telling your story. Stop focusing on yourself and what your products offer, and instead start thinking about your customer, their needs, and their pain points. So basically, you need to show your customers, your investors, the whole crew out there that are looking at your business that what you can do is better, cheaper, faster than whatever is out there already. And always, 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 always answer the question, so what? So I often will have a company come in and say something like, I've developed a really cool technology and it spins really fast. Like, oh, that's cool that you've made it spin really fast. That's really interesting. So why does that matter? Well, it matters because it spins really fast. And it doesn't do anything to tell a potential customer, a potential investor, why your product actually can help them. It's kind of like going to a cocktail party and meeting somebody who does nothing but talk about themselves. And you sit there for 5 minutes and you kind of listen to them go on and on about themselves, and then you walk away. You need to engage with that other person. The same goes with telling your story. You need to tell your story in a very engaging fashion so that people want to keep engaging with you. So tell the reader how you stand out from the crowd and make it interesting, make it compelling, make it sexy. Give them all the information, comfort, and confidence they need to become your champion. And really, I do strongly encourage you to go find Mark Evans' blog online. He has lots of very smart things to say. And that's it. So what's the routine? Questions? What do? We do have... thanks.
We have about 4 minutes for questions before we officially end, and then I'm assuming you're hanging around for a little bit to answer questions after. Okay. All right. So if we can just maybe 2 or 3 questions in the 4 minutes. There are mics on either side in the aisles here. Go ahead, please.
Hello. Hi. Hi. I really liked your presentation. I liked how it has different clips and the visuals and whatnot. I just wanted to ask a little bit about your, passing comment on how startups usually don't go to the banks to get the loans. Why is that so? Can you elaborate?
Sure. I mean, it's usually because the banks need to see a history and a track record, and startups don't generally have it. So unless you're willing to put your house on the line as collateral, they don't like banks don't like risk, and startups are risky. So unless you have something that you're willing to put up for collateral, banks don't tend to lend to startups.
I see. So it's more of it's coming from the banks, not from the. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Just a question about financials. You mentioned that it's really critical. I'm just wondering, some of the companies out there like Twitter or Tesla that, don't make any money or take 10 years to make money. How do they get money from investors? How does that work if financials are so critical?
It's an excellent question. They are not Canadian because that doesn't happen in Canada. So a lot of funding happens on the idea or the number of impressions or the number of users. It gets investors excited. I actually can speak to Tesla because when I was working in New York, I turned down an investment in Tesla because I thought it was absolutely outrageous that somebody thought that they could start an electric car manufacturing company in the US. I didn't even give them a second meeting. I thought it was absolutely insane. They happen to have a visionary leader who, now it's Elon Musk. So of course you're going to invest in Elon Musk, but he wasn't at the time. I mean, he was, but he wasn't the well-known Elon Musk. So there is no hard and fast answer to that. Basically, a lot of money goes into companies on the hope that there will be something big there, but honestly, that really, really rarely happens in Canada. We are just way too risk averse.
Okay, thanks.
So Jane, we do have a question from one of our webcast participants. How can we quickly raise a small amount of startup capital, 10 to 30,000, just about in a very short period of time?
Totally depends on the business. Usually at that level, it's probably grant funding. On the Mars website, there's a widget for the funding portal, which is a great resource. I would suggest going and looking through the funding portal at grants that are available, because it's either grants or friends and family at that level.
Hi, Jane. I have two questions. I have a code, so if you don't hear me, ask me to repeat.
Got it. I can hear you. I will stay far back, though.
Okay. First question is in relationship to what Mark Zimmerman said. So how often, first of all, when do we do this business plan and compared to the business model canvas?
Yeah. And
how often do we change it?
So really, really good. Two questions, really good questions, both of them. So the business model canvas is more of an internal tool. It's a great way to see your company on one page and to be able to see the gaps. You honestly can change that as quickly as your company is changing because it's on one page and it's quite succinct. It's really easy to change, and there are companies that they go back and review it on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. I would say that in this day and age, business plans are generally external looking. It's if you're looking for funding. If you are using it as an internal document, though, updating it, the same terms and conditions around updating it apply. There is absolutely no sense in writing a business plan and putting it on the shelf. Right. It needs to be a living document, one that you go to on a regular basis and that actually guides the business.
So in order to go through all these thinkings, it would probably be at a later stage, not right at the very early starting point.
Yes and no. I mean, at the early stage, you do what you can. It's just, it changes, and so you need to change it. If I was doing a startup, I wouldn't write a business plan. I'd use a business model canvas. That's my preference. You can write a business plan, but because some people think better that way by putting it by actually putting it down on paper, you see connections between the various areas. I would use business model canvas in that scenario. Right. And I would use a business model canvas for internal planning. Really, it's only if it's only if you're looking for money that I would use for a real business plan.
And talking about looking for money, so now in addition to angel investors or VCs, we have all these crowdfunding platforms. So I wonder, how are we going to use this business plan if we want to go to Kickstarter or Indiegogo or things like that?
So essentially, I mean, if you wanted to go to Indiegogo or Kickstarter, you have to have your story straight and you have to be able to explain it very concisely and very clearly. It is essentially like an investor who's going to, look at the executive summary and go, you know what, this thing sucks. Like, I'm not reading the rest of it because reading this first page was agony. The same thing happens with Kickstarter and Indiegogo. You need to get people's attention right away. Otherwise, they'll move on. So you have to have your story clear and concise and your value proposition defined. It really is again, it's all the thinking that goes into the business plan that is behind doing a very clear, concise Kickstarter or Indiegogo write-up.
Got you. Thank you so much.
Okay, we do have to officially end here, but Jane will be around for a little bit longer to answer any other questions. Thank you so much for coming.